started. Welcome everybody. My name's Rolfe of Mentoring Works, and this webinar is how to create a safe space for mentoring. In my view, a mentoring conversation is one where people are safe to explore their thoughts and their feelings. They use critical, creative, and above all, reflective thinking as you're having that conversation with them. And they use that so that they can gain insight and generate possible options for themselves. Excuse me. We want them to make informed choices as they decide on their goals and actions. And we assist them as needed to plan their way forward. And then we support them and encourage them as they implement their plan. Forgive me, I've got painters in another room at the moment and the smell's rather strong getting into my throat. So for a mentoring conversation to take place, so if this is what a mentoring conversation is, for that kind of conversation to take place, we need to create a safe space. That is an environment where people will open up and feel confident and able to speak, to feel heard without any fear. A safe space is the foundation of a mentoring conversation. It means having both a physical and an emotional environment where there is no sense of threat, and we can build trust and rapport between the mentor and the mentee. So in this session, what we're going to look at, first of all, is what I call the Vigilant Brain. What's going on in people's brains automatically, without conscious thought, going on in the background all the time. I want to talk about the major fears that every person has all of the time, but might be particularly at front of mind in a mentoring conversation, especially in the early parts of a mentoring conversation. And then, of course, what we can do to build the trust between our mentors and us. So let's get on, first of all, to what I call the Vigilant Brain. And I like to talk about this because we really need to understand just how easily a simple look, a facial expression, a word or a gesture can actually trigger a threat response in the subconscious brain. And this is because we evolved from ancestors whose survival depended on their ability to react fast to any threat by defending themselves, running away, or hiding. The fight, flight, freeze reaction. So today, your brain is still constantly vigilant, and it's scanning the environment 5 times each second, 5 times each second. And it's asking itself, am I safe? Do I need to defend myself? Do I need to run away? Is there a threat? And if any kind of a threat registered, an instantaneous fight, flight, freeze reaction occurs, it's triggered, and hormones flood the brain, causing us to actually hear differently, to see differently, and to react and respond differently and behave differently. In a heightened state of alertness, people tend naturally to become defensive, and they're less likely to open up and risk that vulnerability that you need for the mentoring conversation. So all this happens in that limbic area at the base of the brain there, the more primitive area that's just primed to respond and keep you safe. So the biggest fears that people have and that are most likely to come to the fore in the early stages of a mentoring conversation, but at any time, we'll see how you respond to this. And I'm interested in your comments if you want to share your observations here. But here are the big 3. judgment, when we feel that someone is looking down at us or passing judgment on us, criticism, and ridicule, if we think people are laughing at us or think we're ridiculous. Those are the three big fears that people have. It's interesting, isn't it? And those will definitely cause our brains to become defensive. So we need to be aware of some things that can create that disparity and that fear in people. It can be things like in the environment, things like a large desk or a chair or symbols of power and status. For some people, a closed door might even be a cause for concern. So the thing is, we need to understand that the limbic brain responds to perceived threats, whether they're real or not, whether they are imagined. And in fact, that part of the brain can't really tell the difference between a real and an imagined threat. You know, you've been to a scary movie. I remember the first time I saw Jurassic Park at the movies, and the raptor leapt up as the kids were just getting through the hole and escaping. And I nearly leapt out of my theatre seat. And later on, I was a bit jumpy too. And this is what actually, this is what happens to people. And what we need to understand too is that when there is even low-grade chronic stress, when people have experience of, say, discrimination or harassment or worse, abuse, they are already primed for a threat response. So once you're primed, you're extra defensive. You are that bit more jumpy. And so it's even more easy to trigger that defensiveness that we really don't want if we're going to have a really open mentoring conversation where people can feel, expose their vulnerability, open up to you if you like. However, there's good news. It's not all doom and gloom. Just as the brain responds to a threat in a certain way, the brain will also respond to what neuroscientists call a reward. So as we really look at what are some of the things specifically that we can work with, these can go either way. They can trigger that threat response. They can also trigger the reward response. And I think it's really helpful that neuroscientists have actually identified 5 social drivers that can create either that threat or reward response in the brain. So clearly what we're going to do is set up our environment, and the safe space will be all around creating more of a sense of reward for the brain than a sense, and avoiding that sense of threat. So the 5 social drivers, as identified by Australians Dr. Norman Chawn and Dr. Terry Hunter of the Brain Link group, what they call the social drivers, they use an acronym SAFETY for these. So the first one is security, and I'll just overview these and then I'll give you in depth of each one. So security is really talking about in the environment, the person has a sense of certainty, predictability, and stability, something we've all been short of the last couple of years. Autonomy, our own freedom to decide and choose for ourselves. Again, something that's been threatened somewhat in the last couple of years. A sense of fairness, so equity, transparency, and social justice. Esteem, so our status, so self-esteem, our status in relation to other people, and the recognition we get from other people and from ourselves. And trust, in this case, this means belonging, so being part of the group, having our own tribe, if you like, feeling safe in relationship to the people around us, being part of that group. And what Norman Chawn and Terry Hunter identified in their research is that everyone responds to each of these 5 levers, if you like, or triggers. Each one of us will respond if we're threatened or we feel rewarded in each of any of these areas. but most of us have one that is the dominant, our favorite one, the one that, will trigger us most of all. It's our personal priority. It's kind of the number one need out of these. And so I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more depth. And go through what feels threatening and what feels rewarding to the brain in each of these areas. And then I'm going to give you the opportunity to choose and share what you think your personal priority out of these might be. So here we go. The first one is security. So, and what feels threatening in this area to our brains is any sense of ambiguity, confusion, or unmet expectations. So we use routines, habits, rules of thumb to make millions of minor decisions each day. And these default settings allow us to do things without thinking. It's as if the brain is on autopilot. Think of the habits you have. You clean your teeth at a certain time. You probably start, when you clean your teeth, you probably start in the same place each day. You have a favourite chair you sit in to have your breakfast. They're just habits. You don't think about them consciously. The brain's on autopilot doing those things. And the reason is when you practice your habits on autopilot, that frees up your conscious brain to think about the things that need your attention in the moment. It frees up the executive function in the front of your mind to deal with immediate and important cognitive tasks. Now, the brain hates change from routine. It feels comfortable in those habits, doesn't like change, doesn't like disruption, doesn't like the unexpected, because when it has to switch off the autopilot to use the executive function to process the new data and act deliberately instead of acting out of habit, it requires effort and uses vital energy. The brain uses up the most amount of energy of any organ in your body. So security to the brain means routine, ordinary, no surprises. On the other hand, if we're wanting to create that reward state where people don't feel threatened, we're looking for familiarity, clarity, and when people can be prepared. So familiarity, so a previous experience. So this will become easier. So once you set up a routine for your mentoring meetings, a way you go through the meetings, once you get more familiar with each other, that will create that reward state. So previous or similar experience, clear expectations, being prepared, forewarned, or briefed about expectations. All those things signal safety to the brain and reduce the likelihood of them being triggered. So autonomy, what we're looking for here is anything that might threaten or be perceived as a threat. Adults want to be self-directing. Most of us hate rigid rules, being given orders or micromanaged. We resent top-down planning that robs us of our own input. These are perceived as a threat. Reward is when we feel like we are in control. We feel like we get to choose. We have choices. And when the relationship is a collaboration with others and we're working with each other, as a team and working together. Fairness, what will push the lever into threat is when we perceive favoritism, any sort of unfair treatment, injustice, the perception of favoritism. Why are they getting that and I'm not? Why are they the in-group and I'm in the out-group? So reward is experienced when we create transparency, when there's a clear rationale for any decisions that are made, and when there is equity. So we're going to talk about shortly what you can do as a mentor to create the reward situation in your mentoring relationship. So the next one, the fourth one, is esteem. And we instinctively understand the importance of status. High status individuals seem to get more, whether it's the corner office, the fancy car, whatever it happens to be, the parking spot, the better assignments at work. And the brain, now remember, this is done at a subconscious level. We mightn't be aware as our brain scans the environment 5 times per second, remember, and it is looking to see, is this person higher status than me? Where do I rank in the pecking order around here? And some people are more susceptible to this than others, but the brain of every person is constantly doing this. So when we feel judged or looked down on, when there is negative feedback, when we're in competition and we don't win, lack of money or having to do the dirty work, can all lower our self-esteem and raise defensiveness. On the other hand, mastery, so self-efficacy, seeing ourselves as competent, being treated with respect, being acknowledged, positive feedback and praise, all create the reward state in the brain. And the final one is trust in the acronym model by Dr. Norman Chorn and Dr. Terry. They call this belonging. They call this trust, but think belonging, because it is really all about being part of the group. So the sorts of things that create a threat is when people feel rejected, when they're ignored, when they feel isolated, alone. There's a reason that that solitary confinement is the worst kind of punishment. Loneliness has a severe impact on our well-being and our health. And when we feel different to other people, that's going to trigger that sense of threat. So what we want to do is make sure that there is inclusion. People feel part of the group, they belong. We make them feel included. There is empathy, there's understanding, and indeed friendship. And these are all things that are going to create that state of reward. So there are the 5 drivers in summary, and I want you to think about which one. Now, they all will trigger you into either threat or reward, defensive or open kind of behaviours. But one of these is probably the primary one for you. So I'm going to launch a poll here, and this is totally anonymous. And just a bit of interest here to see, and you can only choose one of these. I realise some of you are going to come back and say, well, it's a toss-up between a couple of them, but let's have a look at where they fall. And there's no right or wrong, obviously. We are all different. And the reason it's useful to know what your own preference is, and if you understand what that means, I'll talk about that in just a moment. It's really quite important to all of our communication, but particularly in mentoring conversations where we're striving to create that safe space so people can open up and tell us their aspirations, their fears, their challenges, their goals. There's a lot of trust needed in that. And we want the brain to be in the right state of mind so we don't get defensive. Okay, just looking to see just a few seconds more to vote. Okay. Okay, I think I'll end that poll now. For some of you who just joined, I'm sorry, this may not be too easy for you. We've just gone through these 5 areas in a bit more detail. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see now. Yeah, so it looks like the most popular choice is this idea of belonging to a group or tribe. I'd be interested to know what the research is showing. And I'm wondering, the last couple of years we've been through where, as I said, our security has been threatened because certainty, predictability and stability is, been severely affected by both COVID-19 and the sort of restrictions. Autonomy has been impacted by the restrictions and the rules that we've needed to follow for our own safety. But okay, so the one that's coming up as most popular is this idea of trust, belonging to a group or tribe, feeling safe in relationship to others. All right, so we're going to move on. And let me put that away. Okay, I'm just hoping you can see my slide again now. Can you give me an indication in the chat that you're seeing the slide rather than the poll at the moment? Okay, cool. All right, so I want to take this a bit further. And the reason that we've actually talked about those 5 areas and identified your number one in particular is because when we're communicating with others, we have a tendency to use our favorite or what our brain finds most rewarding and indeed most threatening. That becomes our kind of rule of thumb or our default position when we're communicating with others. And this can be a problem. For example, my preference is for autonomy, freedom, lots of choices. But if I use that and you're, like Tracy says, her number one is security. So if she and I are communicating, if I'm really just making too many options, what she needs from me and what a lot of people need is clear guidance. Okay, here's the outcome we're going for. Here's what I'd like you to do. Yes, there's options and freedom around that, but here is the guidance. And then Tracy will feel comfortable with that and be able to respond more freely. Okay, so, and I have found that in some cultures where I've been running training sessions, if I don't give those really clear guidelines, people get really uncomfortable and a bit lost. And so what we learn from this is we need to cater to those other preferences, not just our own. And we need to do this not just in a training scenario, but also in our mentoring. So what we're going to do next is, and I'm just going to check if there are any questions or comments. Just getting my mouse to play nice here. I'm going to look at comments and questions. Okay, good. Okay, if you want to ask a question, make a comment or share your observations at any time, you can do that if you're on the live webinar, that is. Otherwise, don't wait for the invitation, just pop them in and I'll respond to them as I can, depending on how we're going for time. Okay, and Hanif is saying, how do we get an idea of the other person's preference? That's a really good question. Thank you, Hanif. Listen to the words they use. That will give you a clue. That's my main clue. Listen to the words they use and the sorts of things they say and see if you can pick up on that. You don't necessarily have to know the other person's preference. I mean, you can share this information with them and it's in the book and you can have a conversation around that and they may volunteer to you what their preference is based on the information. And that would be really helpful. Just getting some feedback here. I'm just going to try and mute. Okay. Oh, and I've got a cat come to visit. Okay. So you could, with a mentoring situation, you could actually just share the information with them and have a conversation, because it'd be helpful for them as well. You can listen to the sorts of words they use and the phrases they use, and you might pick up on it that way. But the best thing I find is to kind of cover all your bases. Do as much as you can to be aware of the different preferences and kind of touch all those bases as you are having the conversation, and you'll see it's not as hard to do as you might think. So I'm going to go into the next part of our webinar by looking at what to actually do. I'm going to share some ideas, but I'm also going to invite your ideas, and these will probably be things some of you will be doing automatically or as part of your setting up your safe space for a mentoring conversation. So let's, here they are again. Security, autonomy, fairness, esteem, and trust. Or when you see trust in this context, think of that sense of belonging. So what I'd invite you to do, I'd love some participation from you. I have got a handout for you, which I'll pop up in the chat in just a moment, so you can download it. It'll also be on the website for with the recording a bit later on. But thinking about this idea of security, what sort of things do you do to help people? Because remember, everyone responds to all five. People whose preference or number one preference or dominant choice is security will be more sensitive, but everyone will respond to security. So there are things you probably already do. So thinking about your own mentoring conversations, what sort of things do you do or could you do that would help people feel that sense of security? Thinking back to what creates the threat, what creates the reward. So I'm going to put a couple of things up here, and we'll go through each of these, but I would like your thoughts on this. So here's one: agreeing on some ground rules. This is where it's really helpful if you're in a mentoring program, excuse me, because there will already be some ground rules, some guidelines from program organisers really talking about, okay, what is and what is not okay in this mentoring relationship. Lots of mentoring programs will have a mentoring code or a code of ethics. So they will be the agreed ground rules. Okay, so Brenda is saying, I like to have the mentee set up a timeline of activities. Fantastic. So that's also not only appealing to security, and a lot of these things will cross over into different areas. So Brenda's suggestion of having the mentee set up a timeline of activities appeals to both security and autonomy, because they're the ones setting it up. Thanks, Brenda. And Hanif says, understand the expectations. Yes. Okay. So my second point here is discussing your expectations. What do you expect? Or what do you hope for from each other? And Florrie is saying setting boundaries. Yes, excellent. So one of the other things I always suggest to mentors and mentees is that there, for each meeting, there is an agenda. Now, you don't have to get into like taking minutes and really nitpicking details. Just some dot points is all you need. And I recommend that as a mentor, you train your mentee just to send you, a quick, email or text. What's on your mind for this next upcoming session? Train them to do that at the end of every session. There may be some unfinished business. Say hi to my cat if you can see him. But get them to do this, 2 or 3 dot points, the questions they want to ask or the topics they'd like to discuss. This allows you to prepare. So it'll help your sense of security and safety in the meeting, because you'll know what's on their mind. It can remain flexible. You can adjust. You can confirm with them when you start the meeting. But that's another way to actually help build security for them and for you. Okay, so the next one is autonomy. So this is where people like freedom, to choose. They feel like they are in control. So what sort of other things do you do? Okay, Nicola is saying, let them know my own perceived strengths and weaknesses, identify what I can support, what I can help direct, and what I can help direct them to, so they know what to expect out of the relationship. Feel at ease that I'm not an expert in everything, and they are not expected to become one either. Yeah, really good advice there from Nicola. Thank you. Thank you. So autonomy, my first point is listening more than you speak and asking more than you tell. I often talk about using the 80-20 rule in mentoring. So they should be doing 80% of the talking. And you achieve that by asking good questions. It's a topic of another webinar coming up this year. Asking questions, getting them to elaborate on their answers, drawing them out, and really listening well to what they have to say. So it's ask, don't tell. Encourage them to make their own decisions. Now, I'm talking about adult mentoring here, where you are guiding their decision making. You want them to make informed decisions, but they should be their own decisions. You can certainly provide some feedback. Even, you can provide advice and guidance if they ask for that, or if you think it's necessary. But ultimately, we want them to make informed decisions for themselves. They have to live with the consequences of their decisions. You want them to take responsibility. And that's the third point here. Discuss their intentions, their actions, and the likely outcomes, so that they can take responsibility for what they're going to do. Okay, just seeing if there's any more comments, suggestions on these. Do feel free. Love your input coming in here. Okay, so again, these actions on your part will appeal to all 5 of these priorities, and we all have all 5 of these triggers, levers, if you like. So it's not just if this is their preference that these will actually appeal. So when it comes to fairness, that is having an open mind, being able to see both sides of an argument, you can express that in your conversations. And okay. Describing situations from different perspectives. So you might say, well, one way to look at that situation is this, but you know what? There's another way of seeing that. And that just broadens their perspective, and it just demonstrates that you're a fair person that can see more than one point of view. And I believe mentors can be champions of equity. We demonstrate the fairness. We demonstrate unbiased treatment of individuals, regardless of their background. And we welcome and we have empathy for all people. So the next one is this idea of esteem. And I know this was low on the list when you chose your preferences, but nevertheless, it is there in all of us, and it is automatic. Our brain is evaluating and judging us against other people. We need to know where we stand. So as a mentor, you want to treat them as a colleague, as an equal. We want to have our mentoring conversations where we are, regardless of our status and position in an organisation, when we step into our mentoring role, we are stepping into one where we are colleagues, we are peers, we are equal. We have different experiences, we're doing different things, we might be different ages, genders, background, whatever, and yet we are able to respond on that very human level, and do our best not to patronise the other person. I know I find this sometimes when you're dealing with people you don't know and you're trying to be collegiate and equal and understanding and all the rest of it. We can sometimes inadvertently come across as patronising, but we do try to avoid that. Again, being slow to give advice. Can you see how some of these actions that are just good practice for mentors, but they can actually cut across all of these 5 social drivers. So be slow to give advice, even when they're asking for your advice. Now, I'm not saying never give advice, far from it. There is an appropriate time to share an opinion, provide feedback, share some of your experience. However, what you're really trying to do as a mentor is facilitate their thinking and their decision making. You want to help them become self-sufficient, independent, not dependent on you for advice all the time. And providing positive feedback, sharing your positive thoughts about their actions, or getting them to reflect and recall their own success. Now, I know a lot of people, a lot of mentees are really humble, and we might need to prompt them. And I know some cultures don't support, or they kind of frown on people talking themselves up. But as a mentor, we want to encourage our mentees to reflect and see their success and see their strengths. Okay, here's a great suggestion or a comment from Brenda. In academia, inviting the mentee to participate in writing a publication or share in presenting a workshop or work on a research project is esteem building. Excellent suggestion, yeah. Okay, so the final one is trust, but in this context, remember, we're talking about belonging. So we're talking about we build a relationship with our mentee, and we need to remember to build rapport with the mentee every time you speak in the relationship. So it's easier the second, the third, the fourth, the multiple meetings than the first time, but don't think because you establish rapport that in the beginning, that's all there is to it. There's a reason, you know, a little bit of small talk or inconsequential conversation at the beginning of the conversation helps build that rapport, and then you can get onto your agenda. Remind them that conversations are confidential and make sure you keep those confidences, and remind them, because there might be things too that you don't want to go further than the conversation with them. You're sharing something personal about yourself because it adds value to the conversation, not because it's common knowledge necessarily. And be willing to disclose appropriate information about yourself to show that you trust them, but you know, do have that reminder. So any other comments coming up? I will pop that handout that has this slide on it in the chat box for you, and it will be on the website in a moment. So not seeing any more comments, I want to move into the final area of the webinar content today and talk about how we build trust. Now, in Australia, the Roy Morgan organisation use ethics and honesty to rate trust in various professions each year, and nurses have topped the list for 23 years. So congratulations if you're a nurse, doctor, pharmacist, school teacher, engineer, dentist, and so forth. And you can see the list there. And if you cast your eyes to the bottom, no surprises there at the bottom either. So they use the definition of ethics and honesty when they're talking about trusting the professions. But, you know, every relationship is built on trust. And so I want to talk here about how you can build trust in you. And part of what builds trust is at the emotional level, and part comes from a rational perspective. So if you think back on the diagrams of the brain we talked about earlier, you know, the emotions, the quick responses, the fight, flight, freeze response comes in at an emotional an automatic subconscious level. People respond to you emotionally all the time. And a little more slowly, they respond to you at a rational level. So there are 4 areas I'm going to talk about that you can build, that you can use to build your mentees' trust in you. The first is credibility, reliability, mutuality, and reciprocity. So I'm going to go through each of these. And as I do, I want you to think about how you can or do use these to build your mentees' trust, and indeed anyone's trust in you. So credibility means I can believe in you. You're credible to me. I can believe in you. And those we consider trustworthy typically share some characteristics that allow them to establish their credibility with us. We believe in their integrity. So we see them as honest and congruent. And what I mean by that is their acts are their acts support their words. So they walk the talk, if you like. They do what they say they will do, or but their behavior is in alignment with their words. They have capability. So they have knowledge and skills that inspire confidence. Now, someone talked earlier about talking about their own personal strengths and weaknesses, and making the point that they are, as a mentor, they're not an expert in everything, and they don't expect the mentee to become one either. So this would give your mentee great belief in you. This would establish your credibility. I'm not an expert in everything. I do have expertise in these particular areas, but even in those, I don't know everything there is to know. So statements like that are going to build your credibility, and then you can demonstrate that credibility. The second one is reliability, and that simply means that I can count on you. So your mentee can believe that they can trust you because of your reliability. So you demonstrate by your performance. You're someone who performs well in your profession, for example. You have a demonstrated track record of results and effectiveness. So the way you conduct yourself allows them to believe in that reliability. And also consistency is critical. So you meet your commitments. You can demonstrate this by, you turn up on time. You are reliable over time. There's a consistency there. You can use an agenda in your meeting and retain that flexibility. So that's happening. The next one is that mutuality. And this is a really important one that I probably need to explain a bit. And mutuality means that both you and I benefit. There's value in this mentoring relationship for both of us. So this comes about when you demonstrate your intent. So you're positive, you care about your mentee. It's not all about you. In fact, you might put them first a lot of the time, but your motivation is transparent. And I guess this one is really about, I suppose this is why there's a lack of trust in people like politicians. We tend to see politicians who may go into politics with, good intentions, but over time we sort of think, well, are you really there for us or for what you can get? And I think some of them really have their noses in the trough, don't they? However, in this case, we're looking about our intentions are positive. We're mentoring for good reason because we care about people, and our motivation is transparent. There's no hidden agenda here. And the last one is quite interesting. When I was researching the literature on trust, it became really clear that reciprocity is very important. I will trust you more if you demonstrate that you trust me. This is very relevant to mentees. So if you're mentoring me, you give me respect, you acknowledge me, you respect my autonomy, this idea of me making my own choices and my own decisions. You respect my rights in the situation, and you demonstrate confidence in me. So you have faith in my ability and my commitment. You don't treat me like a child, you treat me like an autonomous adult. So isn't it interesting? When you show faith in me, I tend to have more faith in you. I found that quite interesting. So in summary, the 4 areas we can use to build, and we'll talk about how in just a moment, is this idea of credibility. I can believe in you. Reliability. I have faith in, over time. Mutuality. I'm here for both of us. It's not all about me, it's about you as well. And reciprocity. I return your trust. I respect you. So I'd ask you now just to spend a couple of minutes reflecting, and you might care to type in the chat box. I see some things coming in there. Tracy is saying lead by example. That's exactly right. Thanks for that, Tracy. So please think about and perhaps jot down for yourself, how could you demonstrate some of these? And then I'll go on to the next slide. I'll just give you a second to think about that. How will you build the mentees' trust in you personally? And if you're not sure now, jot it down as a question, and you can do this for homework. Oops, I jumped to the slide. So there you are. In terms of the credibility, I believe in you. Be prepared for your meetings. Make sure you've got the time set aside, phones off, other things put to the side. You've got that agenda that they've sent to you. You confirm that that's, yes, what they want to talk about today. And you conduct yourself in a professional way. Reliability, I can count on you. So you're on time. You don't cancel meetings. Now, I know we all get busy, but if there's a problem and you can't make a meeting, let them know as soon as possible and reschedule. Don't just cancel it, because then your mentor will just trickle out the door. And teach them this too. This is respectable. This is respectful. This is business practice. We don't cancel meetings. We may need to reschedule. So mutuality, this mutual benefit. Show them that you care. Remember details. I think one of the actual advantages of a lot of our meetings being on Zoom or other online meetings these days is that you can unobtrusively take a note or two to jog your memory next time, so that you can remember some of those details. And I don't know about you, but when I mentor someone, I find that an enjoyable experience. I actually get value. I often learn something, or I find myself growing as a result. If that's happening for you and you share that benefit, that goes such a long way in that sense of mutuality. And it makes them also less concerned about the fact that they're intruding on your time. So that has value there. And then that reciprocity. So you'll get this through appropriate self-disclosure. You don't need to tell them everything about you, and you don't want to make the conversations all about you. But if it's relevant, if it's appropriate to share some information about yourself with them, then doing that actually builds that belief that you trust them, and do give them your full attention. So there you are. There's some ideas. And great, that brings me to the end of the content of the webinar today, where we've talked about the vigilant brain, the fact that your brain is subconsciously scanning the environment 5 times every second to see if there's anything threatening out there. And if there's a perceived threat, it may not be a real threat, but the brain perceives it as a threat, then the defenses go up, and that gets in the way of our mentoring conversation. We talked about those fears: fear of being judged, fear of being ridiculed, and those sorts of things that we talked about, the 5 social drivers as well, and what to do as a mentor about that. And I will pop that up in the, let me do that now so that you can download it if you need it. Sorry, it takes a minute. Okay, just uploading a PDF for you now. It is just available. It's just the slide that I put up before with the 5 social drivers and how you can use them in your mentoring. And we finally talked about how to build trust using those 4 areas. So just as a quick final, I haven't finished the content, sorry about that. Some ways to build confidence in you. I just wanted to share with you the ideas from Stephen Covey's work, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a classic. It's still relevant and useful today. And he talked in there about the actual bank that you have. It's kind of the emotional bank account, and that's the amount of trust in a relationship. And you can make deposits or withdrawals from that bank by the things you do and the things you say. You can also build their confidence by showing you care, we talked about, respect, we talked about, giving full attention, the 80-20 rule I mentioned earlier, and accepting what they say. You don't have to agree with everything they say, but you accept it. And that appropriate self-disclosure. Some other ways to build their self-confidence: get them to reflect on their past success and draw out from that their strengths and their talents. Get them to write a list of their achievements and share that with you. Achievements in all aspects of their lives are valid. And make sure they're setting achievable goals. If they've got big goals, you can always break them down to smaller goals that are achievable. Get some runs on the board. So, sorry for that. What I'm interested in now is your takeaways from this session, and also your actions. And I'll come back and answer any questions as well. So if you've got comments, questions, observations, if you want to share your key takeaways or your actions, please do so now in the chat box. Just a reminder, 22nd of April is our next webinar, where I'll be providing a framework for your mentoring conversation. I love this session because it means you never have to worry about what you'll say or what you'll do in a mentoring conversation. You'll have the framework to draw on. It's completely flexible, but it also gives you that structure that you need. Today's webinar is based on one of the chapters in my latest book, the Mentors Toolkit for Career Conversations. And I'll send you some information about that later today. It's available in most countries in print and as an ebook. You can find out all the details on the website if you want to go there and have a look. Now you can do that. Just looking for questions, comments, observations, your actions. I'm going to actually stop the recording right now and go to your questions. So if you're watching the recording, please look for the handout, which will be down below. And if you want to sign up to my newsletter, you'll get an invitation to all future webinars, and you will receive the free ebook, Mentoring Demystified. So thanks for being with us, and I'll see you next time.